What would you do if your water broke in front of 300 people and your husband just looked at you and mouthed the words, 5 minutes? Vivian Ashford was 8 months pregnant, standing in the middle of her husband's
One moment
company
of
gala,
silence, please.
champagne glass slipping from her fingers,
As I was saying,
contractions
your presence
starting.
here is no longer
And Marcus,
required.
the CEO husband
Leave
who
now.
had promised to stand beside her through everything, he turned back to his conversation with another woman. What Vivian didn't know yet was that this moment would change everything. That a complete stranger would hold her hand through labor while her husband ate breakfast with his mistress 30 feet away.
Viv.
That the man who should have been there would miss the
Just
birth of
breathe
his own
through
daughter.
it.
And that the stranger who stayed
I'm
would
right
become
here
something
with
she
you.
never expected. This is a story about
This
betrayal
folder
at the worst
contains
possible moment.
undeniable proof
About a
of
woman
your
who lost
embezzlement,
everything and
Marcus.
found
It's
herself.
over.
About the hero who
Vivian,
shows up when
please,
the
I
one you
can
married walks
explain.
away. Stay
It
with me
wasn't
until
what
the
it
end,
looks like.
because the way this story unfolds will leave you breathless. The champagne glass slipped from Vivian's fingers the same moment her water broke. Both shattered against the marble floor of the Ashford Industries anniversary gala. 300 guests turned to stare. The string quartet stopped playing. Crystal shards scattered across white marble like fallen stars. And between Vivian's feet, a spreading pool of fluid that meant only one thing. Her baby was coming, 4 weeks early. Vivian gasped and gripped the edge of the nearest table. Pain rippled through her belly, sharp, real, unmistakable. This was not a false alarm. This was not Braxton Hicks. This was labor. She scanned the crowded ballroom for her husband. Marcus stood across the room in his perfectly tailored Armani suit. He was laughing at something. His hand rested on the lower back of his executive assistant, Renee Blackwell. Vivian called out to him. Her voice cracked, barely audible over the murmurs spreading through the crowd. Marcus looked up. Their eyes met across the ballroom. She watched him register the situation. The broken glass, the wet floor, his 8 months pregnant wife clutching her belly in obvious distress. He held up one finger, mouthed the words, 5 minutes. Then he turned back to Renee, continued their conversation as if nothing had happened. Vivian's knees buckled. Someone caught her before she hit the ground. Strong arms wrapped around her shoulders. Steadied her. A voice spoke close to her ear, deep and calm. "I've got you," the stranger said. "Let's get you out of here." Vivian looked up into eyes she did not recognize. Gray-blue, intense, concerned. The man was tall, dark hair with threads of silver at the temples, late 30s or early 40s. His tuxedo fit like it cost more than most people's cars. She had no idea who he was. She did not care. Another contraction hit, and she gripped his arm like a lifeline. "My husband," she managed to say. "I need my husband." The stranger glanced toward Marcus, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Your husband appears to be occupied," he said. "But your baby is not going to wait. My driver is outside. We need to move, now." He guided her through the crowd. People parted before them like water. Someone grabbed her clutch purse and pressed it into the stranger's free hand. Voices murmured behind them, concerned, curious, gossiping already. The stranger barked orders to the gala staff as they walked. Call ahead to the hospital. Clear a path. Get his car to the front entrance immediately. They burst through the grand doors into the cool night air. A black sedan pulled up within seconds. The driver jumped out and opened the rear door. The stranger helped Vivian into the back seat. She slid across leather, so soft it felt like butter. He climbed in beside her. The car was moving before the door closed. Vivian fumbled for her phone. Her hand shook so badly she could barely unlock it. She found Marcus in her contacts. Called him. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Another contraction seized her. She cried out, grabbed the door handle, squeezed until her knuckles went white. The stranger took her other hand. His grip was firm, warm, grounding. "Breathe," and he said, "in through your nose, out through your mouth. Focus on my voice." She tried to follow his instructions. The pain crested and slowly released. She gasped for air. "My husband," she said again. Tears streamed down her face now. "He's not answering. Why isn't he answering?" The stranger said nothing, but something flickered in his eyes. Something that looked like anger held carefully in check. Vivian called Marcus one more time. Voicemail. She left a message this time. Her voice trembled. Marcus, the baby is coming. I'm going to the hospital. Please, please come. She hung up and stared at the phone, willing it to ring, willing the screen to light up with her husband's name, willing him to care. The phone stayed dark. The stranger spoke quietly to his driver and instructions about the fastest route, which hospital to use, calling ahead to ensure a private room would be ready. Vivian turned to look at him, really look at him for the first time. Who are you? She asked. Nathaniel Cross, he said simply. The name meant nothing to her in that moment. Her brain was too consumed with pain and fear and the devastating realization that was settling over her like ice water. Her husband was not coming. She was going to have this baby alone, in a stranger's car, while Marcus finished his champagne and laughed at whatever clever thing Renee Blackwell had to say. The car pulled up to the hospital entrance. Automatic doors slid open. A nurse was already waiting with a wheelchair. Caroline. Vivian recognized her immediately. They had been friends since college. Caroline had been her labor and delivery nurse for all her prenatal visits. Caroline took one look at Vivian's face and rushed forward. Viv, she said, what happened? Where's Marcus? Vivian could not answer. The words would not come. Admitting it out loud would make it real. Nathaniel stepped forward. He spoke to Caroline in a low voice. Explain the situation. The gala, the ignored phone calls, the husband who chose to stay behind. Caroline's expression hardened. Her eyes went cold. She had never liked Marcus. She had said so many times. But she had kept those opinions mostly to herself out of respect for their friendship. Now her face said everything she had been holding back for years. Let's get you inside, Caroline said. Her voice was professional, steady, but Vivian could hear the fury underneath. Dr. Whitmore is on call. You're in good hands. They helped Vivian into the wheelchair. Caroline took the handles and began pushing her toward the elevator. Nathaniel turned to leave. Vivian reached out and grabbed his sleeve. He stopped, looked down at her hand on his arm, then at her face. Please, Vivian said. Her voice broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't want to be alone. Nathaniel studied her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like pain. You won't be, he said quietly. I'll stay. Caroline raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She pushed the wheelchair into the elevator. Nathaniel followed. The doors slid closed. Vivian stared at the numbers climbing on the display panel. 3rd floor, 4th floor, 5th floor, labor and delivery. She checked her phone one more time. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock, lock. Nothing from Marcus. She was 8 months pregnant. Her water had broken in front of 300 people. Her husband had watched it happen, and he was not here. The elevator doors opened. The scent of antiseptic and industrial cleaner filled Vivian's nostrils. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, a woman screamed through a contraction. Vivian was wheeled into a private room. Helped onto a bed, hooked up to monitors, wires and sensors attached to her belly. The steady rhythm of her baby's heartbeat filled the room. Still alive, still fighting. Even if her father could not be bothered to show up. Carolyn handed Vivian a hospital gown, drew the curtain so she could change, promised to return in a few minutes to check her dilation. Nathaniel sat in the chair in the far corner. He pulled out his phone and began making calls, canceling meetings, rescheduling flights, apologizing to someone about missing a midnight departure to Tokyo. Vivian listened through the thin hospital curtain. This man was rearranging his entire life for a woman he had never met, while her own husband could not be bothered to leave a party. The contrast was almost too painful to process. She changed into the gown, settled back against the thin pillows, stared at the ceiling tiles, and tried to understand how she had ended up here. 8 months pregnant, alone in a hospital room, with a stranger. Another contraction hit. Vivian grabbed the bed rails and breathed through the pain. When it passed, she checked her phone again. Still nothing. She typed out a text to Marcus. Where are you? The message showed as delivered, then read. The 3 dots appeared, indicating he was typing a response. They disappeared. No message came. Vivian set the phone face down on the bed. She could not look at it anymore. Every glance at that empty screen felt like a knife between her ribs. She closed her eyes and placed both hands on her belly, felt her baby kick against her palms. Strong, impatient, ready to meet the world. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her daughter. "I'm so sorry this is how you're arriving. But I promise you this, I will be here. Even if no one else is, I will always be here." The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if she understood, as if she was saying she knew. And she forgave her mother for choosing the wrong man. The hospital room settled into an uneasy quiet. Monitors beeped in steady rhythm. The air conditioning hummed. Outside the window, the city lights glittered against the dark sky. Vivian lay in the narrow bed and watched Nathaniel in the corner. He sat with perfect posture, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a low voice about canceled meetings and rescheduled conference calls. He was missing a flight to Tokyo for her, a woman he did not know, a stranger whose name he had learned less than an hour ago. When he finished his calls, he set the phone aside and met her gaze. "Why are you doing this?" Vivian asked. Nathaniel considered the question. His expression was unreadable. "Because you asked," he said simply. Vivian shook her head. That answer was too easy, too clean. People did not sacrifice international business trips for strangers. Not in her experience. Not in any world she understood. "That's not a real answer," she said. Before Nathaniel could respond, Caroline pushed through the door. She carried a cup of ice chips in a sympathetic expression. "How are we doing in here?" she asked. Vivian forced a smile. It felt brittle on her face. "Contractions are about 10 minutes apart," she said. "The pain is manageable. For now." Carolyn nodded and set the ice chips on the bedside table. She checked the monitors, made notes on her tablet. Everything looked normal. Baby's heart rate was strong. Dilation was progressing, slowly but steadily. "Marcus called the nurses' station," Caroline said carefully. "He said he's wrapping up at the event. Should be here soon." Wrapping up at the event. Those words echoed in Vivian's head. Her water had broken, her baby was coming 4 weeks early. And her husband was wrapping up at an event. She laughed. The sound came out broken, half sob, half hysteria. Then she cried. Then she laughed again. Nathaniel watched without judgment. He did not try to comfort her with empty platitudes, did not tell her everything would be fine. He simply sat in his corner and let her feel whatever she needed to feel. Caroline squeezed Vivian's hand. "I'll be back in 30 minutes to check on you," she said. "Page me if you need anything before then." She left. The door clicked shut behind her. Silence returned. Vivian reached for her phone again. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock, lock. Still nothing. "You should put that down," Nathaniel said gently. "Checking it won't make him call any faster." Vivian knew he was right, but she could not stop herself. The phone was her only connection to Marcus, her only hope that he might still show up, still care, still be the man she thought she married. Another contraction, built in her lower back, spread across her abdomen like a wave of fire. She grabbed the bed rails and breathed through it. The monitors beeped faster. Her baby's heart rate spiked momentarily, then settled. When the pain passed, Vivian leaned back against the pillows, exhausted already. And this was only the beginning. "Tell me something," she said to Nathaniel. "Anything. I need to think about something else." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, considering. "What do you want to know?" he asked. "Why you stayed," Vivian said. "The real reason, not just because I asked." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Something flickered behind his eyes. Old pain, barely contained. "My wife died giving birth to our son," he said. His voice was flat, controlled. 8 years ago, there were complications. I was stuck in traffic across town. Some accident on the freeway. By the time I got to the hospital, it was too late. Vivian's breath caught. "Nathaniel," she whispered, "I'm so sorry." He shook his head, dismissing her sympathy. "I was 13 minutes too late," he continued. "She was alone when she died. The doctors did everything they could, but she was alone. No one should have to go through that alone." The weight of his words settled over the room, heavy, suffocating. "Your son," Vivian said carefully, "is he—" "Oliver is fine," Nathaniel said. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. 8 years old now. Looks just like his mother. Smart as hell. Never lets me win at chess anymore." Vivian smiled despite everything. She imagined a little boy with Nathaniel's serious eyes and his mother's features, beating his billionaire father at chess. "He sounds wonderful," she said. "He is," Nathaniel agreed, Fuan. "He's the best thing that ever happened to me, even though he came at the worst possible price." Silence stretched between them. Comfortable now. Something had shifted. They were no longer complete strangers. Vivian's phone buzzed. She grabbed it so fast she nearly dropped it. "Marcus, I'm on my way," she said as she answered. "Where are you?" "Still at the venue," Marcus said. His voice sounded distant, distracted. "I need to wrap up a few things first. There are some important clients here. I can't just abandon them." "Marcus," Vivian said slowly, "I'm in labor. Our baby is coming." "I know," he said, "but you're in good hands. These things take hours. Probably won't even get serious until morning. I'll be there before anything happens." Vivian felt something crack inside her chest, a fissure in the foundation of her marriage that had been forming for months. Maybe years, maybe always. "Our daughter is coming 4 weeks early," she said. Her voice trembled. "I need you here." "And I'll be there," Marcus said, impatient now. "But I can't drop everything at the snap of your fingers. This is an important night for the company." "Surely you understand that." Vivian closed her eyes. Tears leaked from beneath her lashes. "Fine," she whispered. "I'll be here, whenever you decide to show up." She hung up before he could respond. When she opened her eyes, Nathaniel was watching her. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the anger in the set of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. He had heard everything. "I'm not his priority," Vivian said. The words came out hollow, like she was reading them from a script. "I never was. How did I not see that?" Nathaniel did not answer. There was nothing he could say that would make this better, no words that could undo years of willful blindness. Vivian thought about their wedding day. 4 years ago, Marcus had stood at the altar in his perfect suit, smiled his perfect smile, made his perfect vows. "I promise to stand beside you through everything," he had said. "You will never face anything alone. I will be your partner, your protector, your home." The memory burned. Another contraction hit, harder than the last. Vivian cried out, grabbed the bed rails until her knuckles turned white. Nathaniel was beside her instantly. He took her hand, held it firmly. "I've got you," he said. "Breathe with me, in through your nose, out through your mouth." Vivian followed his voice through the pain. His hand was warm and solid in hers, an anchor in the storm. When the contraction passed, she did not let go of his hand. He did not pull away. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being here." Nathaniel squeezed her fingers gently. "Where else would I be?" The question hung in the air, simple, obvious, and devastating in its implication. Where else would he be? As if there was no question, as if leaving was not even a consideration. Unlike her husband. Nathaniel stepped out briefly to get coffee. When he returned, Vivian had just hung up her phone. She was staring at the wall with an expression he could not quite read. "Marcus called again," she said. Nathaniel handed her a cup of ice chips, sat back down in his corner. "Is he on his way?" "He says so," Vivian replied. "He said he loves me, that everything will be fine." But something in her voice had changed. The words "I love you" had sounded different in her own mouth when she repeated them. Like a foreign language she no longer remembered how to speak. For the first time in her marriage, those words felt like lies. Not because Marcus did not mean them, but because Vivian was no longer sure she believed them. The clock on the wall read 2:17 in the morning when Marcus finally had arrived. Vivian heard him before she saw him. His voice carried down the hallway. Charming the nurses at the station, making small talk, taking his time. The door opened. Marcus walked in carrying a bouquet of flowers from the hospital gift shop. Red roses, Vivian's least favorite flower. She had told him a dozen times that she preferred peonies. He did not remember. He never remembered. Marcus crossed to the bed and kissed her forehead. His lips were cool, impersonal. The kiss of a man fulfilling an obligation rather than expressing love. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Vivian studied her husband's face, looking for concern, worry, fear, any sign that he understood the gravity of this moment. She found none. What she did find was the faint scent of perfume on his collar. something floral and expensive, something that was not hers. The contractions are about 8 minutes apart now, she said flatly. The doctor thinks we have a few more hours. Marcus nodded, already distracted, already reaching for his phone. Good, he said. That gives me time to prep for the Beijing call. It's at 6, crucial meeting, can't miss it. Vivian stared at him. Her contractions were 8 minutes apart. Their daughter was about to enter the world, and he was thinking about a conference call with Beijing. The Beijing call, she repeated slowly. That's what you're worried about right now? Marcus looked up from his phone. Irritation flickered across his features. It's a $50 million deal, Vivian. Surely you understand that I have responsibilities. She understood. She finally completely understood. She was not a wife to him, not a partner, not even a priority. She was a responsibility, an obligation, another item on his endless to-do list. Have baby, check. Send flowers to wife, check. Close Beijing deal, check. All equal, all interchangeable, all meaningless. Marcus glanced around the room. His eyes landed on Nathaniel in the corner. His expression shifted. Confusion gave way to recognition. Recognition gave way to calculation. Nathaniel Cross, Marcus said. His voice changed completely. Warmer, more respectful. The voice he used for important clients and potential investors. I didn't expect to see you here. Nathaniel stood, unfolded his tall frame from the chair. He was half a head taller than Marcus, broader in the shoulders. Something about his posture suggested contained power. Your wife needed assistance at the gala, Nathaniel said. His tone was polite, neutral, but his eyes were cold. I offered to help. Marcus processed this information. Vivian could see his mind working, calculating angles, assessing opportunities. Nathaniel Cross, founder and CEO of Cross Industries. Net worth somewhere north of $12 billion, 3 times the size of Ashford Industries, a whale in a sea of minnows, and he was standing in Marcus's wife's hospital room. That's very kind of you, Marcus said smoothly. I'm sure Vivian appreciates it, but I'm here now. You don't need to trouble yourself any further. It was a dismissal, polite but firm. Get out of my territory. Nathaniel looked at Vivian, a silent question in his eyes. Vivian hesitated. Part of her wanted to send Nathaniel away, to pretend that everything was normal, that her husband had arrived and would take care of everything. But nothing was normal. Nothing would ever be normal again. Stay, she said quietly. Please. Marcus's jaw tightened, just for a moment. Then the charming smile returned. Of course, he said. The more the merrier. He pulled out his phone again, began typing an email. The glow from the screen illuminated his face in the dim room. Vivian watched him, trying to reconcile this man with the one she had married, the one who had swept her off her feet 6 years ago, who had promised her the world, who had made her believe that fairy tales could come true. When had he changed? Or had he always been this way? Memories flooded through her. Their first date at that little Italian restaurant downtown. Marcus had been so attentive, so focused on her every word. He had asked about her dreams, her fears, her hopes for the future. She had fallen in love with his attention, his intensity, the way he made her feel like the only person in the world. But looking back now, she realized something devastating. He had never really listened. He had been gathering information, learning her weaknesses, identifying the words she needed to hear. He had been closing a deal. The engagement came fast. 6 months after their first date, a massive diamond ring, a proposal on a rooftop overlooking the city. Everything perfect, everything choreographed, everything empty. The wedding was even more elaborate. 300 guests, a 15-tier cake, coverage in the society pages. Marcus had spared no expense, but the expense was the point. The wedding was not about their love. It was about his image, his brand, his carefully curated public persona. She was just another accessory, like the Rolex on his wrist and the Maserati in his garage. Another contraction pulled Vivian from her memories. She gripped the bed rails, breathed through the pain. 8 minutes since the last one. Marcus did not look up from his phone. Nathaniel moved to her side, took her hand without being asked. "You're doing great," he said. "Just breathe." Vivian focused on his voice. Let it guide her through the worst of the pain. When the contraction passed, she realized she was squeezing his hand hard enough to leave marks. "Sorry," she murmured. "Don't be," he replied. Marcus finished his email, slipped his phone back in his pocket, checked his watch. "I need to step out for a bit," he said. "Make a few calls, prepare for the morning meeting." Vivian said nothing. What was there to say? Marcus kissed her forehead again. That same impersonal touch. "I'll be back soon," he promised. "Try to get some rest." He walked out. The door swung shut behind him. Silent, Vivian stared at the ceiling, counting the tiles, trying to feel anything other than the hollow ache spreading through her chest. "He's not coming back," she said. It was not a question. Nathaniel did not insult her with false reassurances. "No," he said quietly. "I don't think he is." Vivian nodded, accepting the truth she had been avoiding for years. Her marriage was over. It had probably never really existed. She was alone, except she was not alone. Not completely. A stranger sat beside her, holding her hand, keeping his promise. That was more than her husband had ever done. Caroline appeared in the doorway. Her expression was tight, controlled, but Vivian could see the anger burning beneath the surface. "I overheard something," Caroline said carefully. "In the hallway. Marcus was on the phone." Vivian's stomach dropped. "What did you hear?" Caroline closed the door, walked to the bed, took Vivian's other hand. "He was talking to someone," she said. "A woman. He called her baby. He said he would be there soon, that he was just handling this." Handling this. This meaning his wife, his daughter, his family, just handling it. Vivian felt the last wall crumble, the wall she had built around her heart. The wall that protected her from seeing the truth. Her husband was not making business calls. He was not preparing for Beijing. He was talking to another woman, calling her baby, making promises to her while his wife labored alone. "Who?" Vivian whispered. But she already knew. "I don't know for certain," Caroline said, but he was looking toward the elevator when he hung up, and Renee Blackwell was waiting there. Renee, his executive assistant, the woman whose back he had been touching at the gala, the woman who wore perfume that now lingered on his collar, the woman who had stolen her husband. Or had she stolen anything at all? You cannot steal what was never really given. Marcus had never truly belonged to Vivian. He had belonged to himself, to his ambition, to his image. Everything else was secondary, including his wife, including his daughter. Vivian's face crumbled. The tears came. Not delicate tears, not pretty tears. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Caroline held her, let her cry, did not try to fix what could not be fixed. Nathaniel stood by the window, his back was to the room, giving her privacy in her grief. But she could see the tension in his shoulders, the barely contained fury. When the sobs finally subsided, Vivian wiped her face, took a shaky breath. "I want to know everything," she said. Her voice was raw but steady. "Everything he's been hiding. Everything I've been too blind to see." Carolyn nodded. "Are you sure?" Vivian placed her hand on her belly, felt her daughter kick. "I need to know what I'm surviving," she said. "I need to know what kind of man is the father of my child." 3:27 in the morning. The hospital was quiet. Night shift nurses padded through the halls on soft-soled shoes. Monitors beeped their steady rhythms. Somewhere on the floor, a newborn cried. Vivian lay in her bed and stared at her phone. The screen glowed in the darkness. Google search results filled the display. "Signs your husband is cheating." She scrolled through the list. Each item hit like a punch to the gut. "He is more attentive to his phone than to you." Check. "He works late more frequently." Check. "He has become critical of your appearance." Check. "He avoids intimacy." Check. "He gaslights you when you express concerns." Check. 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 The list read like a biography of her marriage. Every warning sign she had ignored. Every red flag she had explained away. Every gut feeling she had buried because she wanted so desperately to believe. She thought about the past 2 years, the slow erosion of their relationship, the distance that grew wider with each passing month. Marcus used to text her during the day. Sweet messages. Thinking of you. Can't wait to see you tonight. Miss your face. Those messages had stopped. Gradually at first, then completely. She had asked him about it once. He had dismissed her concerns. I'm busy, Vivian. I don't have time to send love notes like a teenager. You know I love you. I shouldn't have to prove it every 5 minutes. She had apologized for being needy, for not understanding the pressures of his job. She had apologized for noticing that her husband no longer cared. The memories came faster now. Relentless, unforgiving, their anniversary last year. She had made reservations at the restaurant where they had their first date, bought a new dress, had her hair done. Marcus had canceled at the last minute. Emergency at work, could not be avoided. She had eaten alone at their anniversary table, pretending not to notice the pitying looks from the waitstaff. 3 days later, she saw the photos on social media. Marcus at a charity gala. Renee Blackwell at his side, both smiling, both radiant. She had asked him about it. He had grown angry. It was a work event, Vivian. Renee is my assistant. She assists me. That's literally her job. Are you going to interrogate me every time I'm seen with a female colleague? She had apologized again. Always apologizing. Another contraction hit. Stronger now, closer together. 5 minutes since the last one. Vivian gripped the bed rails and breathed through the pain. Nathaniel appeared at her side. His hand found hers without hesitation. 5 minutes apart, he said when the contraction passed. It's progressing. Vivian nodded, too exhausted to speak, too overwhelmed to process. Her baby was coming, her marriage was ending, and she was stuck in this bed, helpless to control any of it. Dr. Whitmore came in to examine her. The OBGYN was in her early 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes. She had delivered hundreds of babies, seen thousands of women through their most vulnerable moments. She checked Vivian's progress, made notes, adjusted the monitors. 6 centimeters dilated, she announced. You're doing beautifully, Vivian. Still a few more hours but everything looks good. The baby, Vivian said. Is she okay? Dr. Whitmore smiled, that grandmother warmth that made everything feel safer. Heart rate is strong. Position is good. She's ready to meet her mama. The word mama hit Vivian like a wave. In a few hours, she would be someone's mother, responsible for a tiny human being who would depend on her for everything. She could not fail. Not at this, not when she had failed at so much else. Dr. Whitmore left. The room fell quiet again. Vivian picked up her phone, typed a message to Marcus. Where are you? The message delivered, then showed as read. 3 dots appeared, indicating he was typing. The dots disappeared. No response came. Vivian set the phone face down on the bed. She could not look at it anymore. Every glance was a fresh wound. He's not coming back, she said, stating the obvious, making it real. Nathaniel sat in his chair. His face was shadowed in the dim light. What are you going to do? He asked. Vivian considered the question. A month ago, she would have made excuses, justified his behavior, convinced herself that things would get better. But something had shifted tonight. Some final thread had snapped. I don't know, she admitted. I can't think about that right now. I can't think about anything except getting through this night. Nathaniel nodded. Then that's what we'll do, he said. Get through this night. Everything else can wait. Vivian closed her eyes, tried to rest between contractions, but her mind would not stop spinning. She thought about how she and Marcus had met, a mutual friend's party. She had been 25, fresh out of graduate school, working her first real job at a nonprofit arts organization. Marcus had walked in like he owned the place. Expensive suit, confident smile, eyes that seemed to look right through her. He had approached her within minutes, introduced himself, made her laugh, made her feel special. Looking back now, she recognized the technique, the same charm he used on clients, on investors, on anyone he wanted something from. She had been a target, a conquest, and she had made it so easy for him. Their courtship had been a whirlwind. Fancy dinners, weekend trips, flowers delivered to her office every Monday. He had pursued her with single-minded intensity. She had never questioned it, never wondered why a successful CEO would be so fixated on a 25-year-old nonprofit worker. The answer was obvious now. He wanted a wife who would be grateful, dependent, someone who would not question him or challenge him, someone who would look good at parties and stay quiet when it mattered. She had fit the profile perfectly. The engagement came fast, too fast, some of her friends had said. But Vivian had dismissed their concerns. She was in love. What did timing matter when you had found your person? She had not found her person. She had been found by a predator. Another contraction built. Vivian grabbed Nathaniel's hand, squeezed hard, breathed through the pain. When it passed, she opened her eyes, saw her hospital bag on the chair by the window. The bag she had packed weeks ago with everything she would need for the delivery. There was a onesie in that bag, pink with white letters, Daddy's Girl. She had bought it at a boutique downtown, imagining how Marcus would react when he saw their daughter wearing it, imagining the pride on his face. Those imaginations felt grotesque now, naive, pathetic. "Can you hand me that bag?" she asked Nathaniel. He retrieved it, set it on the bed beside him. Vivian dug through the contents, found the onesie, held it up in the dim light. Daddy's Girl. She crumpled it in her fist, threw it in the trash can by the door. Nathaniel said nothing, but she saw his jaw tighten, saw his hands clench briefly on the armrests of his chair. "She doesn't have a daddy," Vivian said. Her voice was steady now, cold. "She has a father, a sperm donor with a corner office. But she doesn't have a daddy, and maybe that's better. Maybe it's better to have no father than a father like him." The words hurt coming out, but they were true. And right now, truth was all she had left. Between contractions, Vivian reorganized her hospital bag, folding and refolding the tiny clothes, straightening the blankets, counting the diapers. It was busy work, meaningless activity, but it gave her hands something to do, her mind something to focus on besides the wreckage of her life. Nathaniel watched her from his chair. He did not try to help, did not offer suggestions, just sat with her in the quiet and let her cope in whatever way she needed. That silence was more comforting than any words could have been. The sun rose over the city at 6:42 in the morning. Golden light spilled through the hospital window, illuminating the room, chasing away the shadows of the night. Vivian had not slept. The contractions were too close now, 4 minutes apart. The pain was intense, but she refused the epidural. She wanted to feel everything, wanted to be present for every moment of her daughter's arrival. Even if it meant suffering, she had done enough numbing, spent years dulling her instincts, ignoring her pain, looking away from the truth. No more. Caroline returned with information. She had spent her break digging into hospital records, calling in favors, piecing together a timeline that made Vivian's stomach turn. "Renee Blackwell," Caroline said. "She's been coming to Dr. Peterson for routine checkups, the same practice where you get your annual exams." Vivian processed this information. "So what?" she asked. Caroline hesitated. "Her emergency contact is listed as Marcus Ashford. Relationship, partner." The word hit like a sledgehammer. Partner, not employer, not boss. Partner. "How long?" Vivian whispered. Caroline consulted her notes. "The records go back 2 years before your wedding, Viv. He was seeing her before he married you. 2 years. Their entire marriage had been a lie. Every vow, every promise, every whispered "I love you" in the dark. All of it built on deception. Vivian thought about their wedding night. Marcus making love to her for the first time as her husband. Gentle, tender, perfect. Had he been thinking of Renee? Had he touched Vivian and imagined someone else? She felt sick. "There's more," Caroline said reluctantly. Vivian braced herself. "Renee has a separate health insurance policy through Marcus, not through Ashford Industries, through his personal accounts. He's been paying for her medical care out of his own pocket." "Why would he do that?" Vivian asked. But she already knew. "Because she's not just his mistress," Caroline said gently. "She's his other life, his second family waiting in the wings." Vivian's phone buzzed. A text from a number she did not recognize. She opened it. The message contained 3 photographs, screenshots from social media, Marcus and Renee at various events, a charity gala, a business conference, a weekend trip to wine country. The final photo showed them on a beach at sunset. Marcus's arm around Renee's waist, both of them smiling like honeymooners. The photo was dated 3 weeks ago, the weekend Marcus had said he was at a leadership retreat with his executive team. He had been at the beach with his mistress, while Vivian was home alone, 8 months pregnant, believing every lie he told. Another text arrived from the unknown number. "I thought you should know. You deserve better than this." Vivian stared at the screen. Someone was helping her. Someone who had seen enough of Marcus's deception to take action. She did not know who, did not care. The evidence was what mattered. The door to her room opened. Vivian looked up, expecting Carolyn. It was Mallory Ashford, Marcus's mother. The older woman swept in wearing a designer suit and an expression of barely concealed disdain. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, not a single element out of place. "Vivian," Mallory said coolly, "I came as soon as I heard." It was a lie. Vivian had been in the hospital for nearly 12 hours. If Mallory had cared, she would have come sooner. "Where's Marcus?" Mallory continued, scanning the room. Her eyes lingered on Nathaniel with obvious curiosity. "I don't know," Vivian said flatly. "Perhaps you should ask his mistress." Mallory's expression flickered, just for a moment, a crack in the facade that revealed something underneath. She knew. Marcus's mother knew about the affair, had probably known for years, and she had said nothing, done nothing, protected her precious son at the expense of his wife. "Whatever problems you and Marcus are having can be discussed after the baby arrives," Mallory said stiffly. "Now is not the time for dramatics." Dramatics. Vivian was in labor, her husband was cheating on her, and Mallory called it dramatics. "Get out," Vivian said quietly. Mallory's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" "Get out of my room," Vivian repeated. Her voice was calm, steady, cold as ice. "You knew. You covered for him. You let me walk into a marriage that was a lie from the beginning. You are not welcome here." Mallory drew herself up, offended, indignant. "How dare you speak to me that way," she said. "After everything our family has done for you, we gave you a life most women would kill for." "You gave me a prison," Vivian replied, "with very expensive bars. Now leave, before I have security escort you out." Mallory looked at Nathaniel, expecting him to intervene, to take her somewhere. Nathaniel remained silent. His expression said everything. Mallory's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned and walked out without another word. The door slammed behind her. Vivian's hands were shaking. Adrenaline coursed through her veins. She had never stood up to Mallory before, never challenged the woman's authority. It felt terrifying and liberating. "Well," Caroline said from the doorway. She was grinning. "That was about 4 years overdue." Vivian laughed despite everything, a genuine laugh that felt foreign after so many hours of pain. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Marcus. "My mother said you were rude to her. We'll discuss this later. These hormone swings are getting out of control." Hormone swings. He was blaming her emotional response on pregnancy hormones, dismissing her legitimate anger as a medical condition. This was what he did, what he had always done: minimize, deflect, gaslight. Anytime she had valid concerns, he blamed her emotions, her insecurities, her irrational female brain. And she had believed him, every single time. The signs were all there. I just didn't want to see them. She did not reply to his message. There was nothing left to say. Nathaniel stood by the window. He was on his phone again, speaking quietly, intensely. Vivian caught fragments of the conversation. "Full security detail, starting immediately. No one gets access without her explicit approval." He was making arrangements, protecting her, building walls around a woman he had known for less than a day. When he finished the call, he met her eyes. "You're going to need support," he said simply. "Legal, financial, security. Whatever happens next, you should not face it alone." Vivian nodded, too overwhelmed to refuse, too exhausted to pretend she did not need help. For the first time in her marriage, she was admitting the truth. She needed help. She could not do this alone. And accepting that help was not weakness. It was survival. The contractions came faster now, 3 minutes apart, then 2. Vivian's whole body tensed with each wave of pain. Sweat soaked through her hospital gown. Her grip on the bed rails turned her knuckles white. Dr. Whitmore examined her again. Her expression shifted. Concern flickered behind her professional calm. 8 centimeters, she announced. Almost there, but we need to monitor the baby's heart rate closely. It's showing some irregularities. Irregularities. The words sent ice through Vivian's veins. What kind of irregularities? She demanded. Probably nothing serious, Dr. Whitmore said carefully, but I want to be cautious. If the pattern continues, we may need to consider a cesarean section, a C-section, emergency surgery with no one here except a stranger and a hospital friend. Vivian grabbed her phone, called Marcus. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Marcus, she said into the recording. Her voice cracked. Please. Something might be wrong with the baby. I need you here, please. She hung up, stared at the phone, willing it to ring. It did not ring. Where is he? She whispered. Not really asking, just expressing the question that echoed through her skull. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. I'll find out, he said. He stepped into the hallway. Vivian heard him making calls, his voice sharp, demanding. When he returned, his expression was carved from stone. He's in the cafeteria, Nathaniel said quietly, with Renee, having breakfast. Breakfast. Her husband was eating eggs and toast while his wife and daughter fought for their lives. Vivian did not cry. She was beyond tears, beyond feeling. Something inside her had died. Whatever thread still connected her to Marcus had finally snapped. Get him, she said. Her voice was empty, hollow. Bring him here. I want to see his face when he realizes what he's done. Nathaniel hesitated. Are you sure you don't need more stress right now? I need to see him, Vivian repeated. One last time, before I close this chapter forever. Nathaniel nodded, left the room. The next contraction hit, the strongest yet. Vivian screamed. The monitors beeped frantically. Nurses rushed in. Dr. Whitmore checked the readouts. Her expression grew more serious. Baby's heart rate is dropping, she announced. We need to prep for an emergency C-section. Now. Everything happened fast after that. Nurses swarmed around Vivian. An IV was adjusted. Forms were thrust in front of her to sign. Someone was explaining the procedure, but the words blurred together. They were going to cut her open, take her baby out, and she was alone. Wait, Vivian gasped. Wait, please, I can't do this alone. A familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Nathaniel, wearing blue surgical scrubs that someone had hastily thrown at him. You're not alone, he said. He took her hand, held it firmly, his eyes locked onto hers. I'll be right beside you, he said, the whole time. I'm not going anywhere. They wheeled her bed toward the operating room. The fluorescent lights blurred overhead. Vivian kept her eyes on Nathaniel's face, an anchor in the chaos. As they rounded a corner, she saw them. Marcus and Renee, standing by the elevator, holding coffee cups, smiling at something on his phone. They did not even notice the gurney rushing past, did not see the woman being wheeled to emergency surgery, did not hear the frantic beeping of the monitors. Marcus glanced up briefly. His eyes passed over Vivian without recognition, returned to his phone. He did not know, or he did not care. Either way, the result was the same. His wife was fighting for her life 30 feet away, and he was scrolling through his phone. The operating room was cold, bright, sterile. Vivian shivered on the table as they positioned her for surgery. A curtain was raised across her midsection. She could not see what was happening below, could only feel the pressure, the pulling, the strange sensation of being opened and emptied. Nathaniel sat beside her head, her hand crushed in his grip. You're doing amazing, he said. It's almost over. Just a few more minutes. Vivian wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that everything would be okay. But she could hear the tension in the doctor's voices, see the worry in the nurse's eyes. Something was wrong, something they were not telling her. The moment before they made the final incision, Vivian reached for her phone, typed a message with trembling fingers. If I don't survive this, remember I tried. I really tried. She did not know who she was sending it to, did not have a recipient in mind, just needed to put the words somewhere, make them exist. A cry cut through the operating room, thin, reedy, but strong. Her baby was crying. She's here, Dr. Whitmore announced. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, and she's perfect. Perfect. Vivian burst into tears, relief and joy and grief all tangled together in a sob that shook her whole body. They brought the baby to her. A tiny pink face wrapped in white blankets, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open in a furious wail. Her daughter. "Hello, Grace," Vivian whispered. "Welcome to the world. It's a mess out here, but I promise I'll protect you. No matter what." The baby's cries softened, as if she recognized her mother's voice, as if she understood. Nathaniel watched from his chair. Something glistened in his eyes that might have been tears. "She's beautiful," he said quietly. Vivian nodded, too overwhelmed to speak, too full of love to contain it. Her marriage was over. Her life was in ruins. Everything she thought she knew had crumbled to dust. But her daughter was here, alive, perfect. And that was enough. For now, that was enough. I brought her into this world alone. I can raise her alone too. The recovery room was quiet. Dawn light filtered through the windows, golden and soft, a new day beginning. Vivian held Grace against her chest, skin to skin, feeling her daughter's heartbeat against her own. The warmth of that tiny body was the most precious thing she had ever known. Carolyn had helped her with the first feeding, guided her through the unfamiliar mechanics of nursing. Grace had latched on instinctively, hungry for life, ready to fight for her place in the world. Like mother, like daughter. Nathaniel sat in the corner, still there, still present. 8 years ago, he had been 13 minutes too late for his own wife. He was making sure Vivian never experienced that same abandonment. A nurse knocked on the door, asked about the father's information for the birth certificate. "What name should we list for the father?" she asked brightly. Vivian hesitated. Marcus was the father. Biologically, legally, there was no avoiding that truth. But listing his name felt like giving him something he did not deserve. A claim on her daughter. A connection he had already rejected. "I'll provide that later," she said finally. The nurse nodded and left. Nathaniel met her eyes, said nothing, but understanding passed between them. Some decisions needed time. Some truths needed processing. Grace's birth certificate could wait until Vivian knew what her future looked like. The door opened again, this time without a knock. Marcus walked in. He carried flowers, expensive ones this time. Peonies, her favorite. Someone had finally informed him. He also carried a teddy bear, pink bow around its neck, the kind of generic gifts sold at every hospital gift shop in America. "There she is," Marcus said. His voice dripped with manufactured warmth. "My beautiful girls." He approached the bed, looked down at Grace. His expression shifted through several emotions in quick succession. Surprise, calculation, possession. "She's perfect," he said. "What did we decide to call her?" We did not decide anything. Vivian had decided, alone in a hospital room with a stranger, while her husband ate breakfast with his mistress. "Her name is Grace," Vivian said flatly. "Grace Vivian Ashford." Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Grace is lovely," he said carefully. "But we discussed naming her after my grandmother, Elizabeth. It's a family tradition." They had discussed no such thing. Marcus had mentioned his grandmother once, in passing, months ago. Vivian had never agreed to anything. But this was what he did. Rewrote history, convinced her that his version of events was the only truth. "Her name is Grace," Vivian repeated. "It's already on the paperwork." First crack in the facade, Marcus's smile flickered. Annoyance leaked through before he regained control. "Fine," he said. "Grace is fine. We can always use Elizabeth as a middle name." Her middle name was Vivian, after her mother. The mother who had survived childbirth alone while her father was too busy with his mistress to answer his phone. Vivian said nothing. Let him believe what he wanted. It did not matter anymore. Marcus finally noticed Nathaniel in the corner. His expression shifted again. Calculation. Opportunity. "Mr. Cross," Marcus said. "Still here? That's quite dedicated. I hope my wife hasn't been too much trouble." Too much trouble. His wife had nearly died. His daughter had been born in an emergency surgery, and Marcus was talking about trouble. Nathaniel stood. His full height seemed to fill the room. Your wife was no trouble at all, he said. His voice was polite but cold. She was incredibly brave. I was honored to witness it. Marcus processed the subtext. Someone had witnessed what he had missed. Someone important. Someone who might talk. Well, Marcus said, recovering smoothly, I appreciate you stepping in, but I'm here now, family time. You understand? It was a dismissal. Again, get out of my space, Nathaniel looked at Vivian. Would you like me to stay? He asked. The choice was hers. Part of Vivian wanted to say yes, wanted to keep this steady presence beside her. This man who had held her hand through the worst night of her life. But part of her needed to face Marcus alone, needed to see clearly what her marriage had become without any witnesses or buffers. It's okay, she said. Thank you for everything. Nathaniel nodded, pulled a business card from his wallet, and pressed it into her palm. For anything, he said quietly. Anytime. Call. He left. The door closed behind him. Vivian and Marcus were alone, with their daughter, the family that had never really existed. Marcus sat in the chair Nathaniel had vacated, pulled out his phone, began scrolling through emails. The Beijing deal closed, he said absently. 53 million. Record quarter for the company. $53 million. While his wife was in emergency surgery. While his daughter was fighting to survive. Congratulations, Vivian said. The word tasted like ash. Marcus looked up, finally seemed to notice her tone. What's wrong with you? He asked. Irritation creeping in. I thought you'd be happy. This deal means we can buy that house in the Hamptons you wanted. She had never wanted a house in the Hamptons. That was his dream, his status symbol, another prop in his carefully curated life. I don't want a house in the Hamptons, Vivian said quietly. Then what do you want? It was not a real question. He did not actually want to know. He was trying to identify the obstacle, fix the problem, close the deal. I want a husband who answers his phone when his wife is in labor, Vivian said. I want a partner who shows up when it matters. I want someone who sees me as more than an accessory. Marcus's expression hardened. Here we go again, he said. The endless complaints. Nothing is ever good enough for you. I work 80 hours a week to give you everything you could want, and all I get is criticism. The familiar script, the one he always used when she tried to voice her needs. Turn the conversation around. Make her the problem. Make her apologize for having feelings. Not this time. You were eating breakfast with your mistress while I was in surgery, Vivian said. Her voice did not waver. Our daughter was born while you were 30 feet away scrolling through your phone. Don't you dare make this about my gratitude. Marcus's mask slipped completely. Cold fury replaced the practiced charm. Who told you about Renee? He demanded. Not denial, not explanation, just demand for information. Identify the leak. Contain the damage. Everyone knows about Renee, Vivian said. Everyone except the wife you've been lying to for years. Marcus stood abruptly. The chair scraped against the floor. This is not the time for this conversation, he said. You just had a baby. Your hormones are out of control. We'll discuss this when you're thinking clearly. He walked out, left his flowers and his teddy bear, and his promises scattered on the floor. Vivian held her daughter close, breathed in the sweet newborn scent. It's just us now, she whispered to Grace. But that's okay. We're going to be okay. The baby stirred, made a soft sound that might have been agreement. Marcus did not see a rival when he looked at Nathaniel. He saw an opportunity. And that was the moment Vivian knew her marriage was truly over. 3 days after Grace was born, Vivian went home. Home. The word felt wrong now. The penthouse had been her prison for 4 years. A gilded cage with designer furniture and central air conditioning. Marcus was rarely there. Working late, every night. The Beijing deal had closed, but there was always another deal, always another excuse. Vivian did not mind his absence. In fact, she welcomed it. Each hour alone was another hour to prepare. She spent the nights documenting everything. Screenshots of text, photographs of receipts, credit card statements showing purchases she had never made, gifts she had never received, trips she had never taken. Marcus had been careless, or perhaps just confident that she would never look. never question, never wake up from the dream he had constructed around her. He had underestimated her. At 2 in the morning, while Grace slept in the bassinet beside her bed, Vivian read through every text message from the past 2 years. All the lies jumped out at her now. So obvious, so blatant. Working late tonight, don't wait up. Sent from a restaurant where his credit card had been charged $300 for dinner for two. Leadership retreat this weekend, no phone service. Posted on Renee's Instagram from a beach resort in Mexico. Important client dinner, probably won't make it home. Followed by a charge at a jewelry store for a necklace Vivian had never seen. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, damning. She compiled it all into a folder on her laptop, backed it up to the cloud, sent copies to an email address only she could access. When Marcus finally discovered what she was planning, he would try to destroy the evidence, lock her out of their accounts, erase the proof of his betrayal. She would be ready. The prenup haunted her. That document she had signed 6 years ago, young and naive and desperately in love. She had not even had a lawyer review it. Marcus had said it was just a formality, standard procedure for someone in his position. She had trusted him. The prenup gave her almost nothing. A small settlement, no claim to his company or his assets, just enough to survive on for a year, maybe two. After that, she would be on her own, raising a daughter with no income, no career, no marketable skills. 4 years as Marcus's wife had stripped her of everything. Her friends, her independence, her identity. She had become Mrs. Marcus Ashford. Nothing more, nothing less. But somewhere beneath all those layers of performance, Vivian still existed. The woman she had been before. The woman who had graduated top of her class. Who had dreams and ambitions and fire. That woman was waking up. On the 4th day Dorothy arrived, Vivian's mother stood in the doorway of the penthouse looking uncertain. Smaller than Vivian remembered. Older than her 58 years. They had not spoken in 3 years. Not since their last fight about Marcus. Dorothy had called him controlling. Vivian had defended him. Words were said that could not be taken back. I heard about the baby, Dorothy said. Through Ellen, she's still friends with your aunt. Small-town gossip traveled fast, even to estranged mothers. What do you want? Vivian asked. Not hostile, just tired. To help, Dorothy said simply. If you'll let me. Vivian studied her mother's face, looking for the manipulation, the judgment, the criticism that had characterized their relationship for so long. She found none. What she found was guilt, regret, the desperate hope of a woman who knew she had failed her daughter and wanted one last chance to make it right. Why now? Vivian asked. Why after all these years? Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. Because I stayed with your father for 23 years, she said. Watched him cheat, watched him lie, watched myself disappear into his shadow. I should have left, should have shown you what strength looked like. Instead, I taught you how to tolerate the intolerable. The words hung between them, raw, honest. The first truly honest thing Dorothy had ever said about Vivian's childhood. You knew about Dad? Vivian whispered. Of course I knew, Dorothy replied. Everyone knew. I just convinced myself that staying was noble, that I was protecting my family. But all I was doing was teaching my daughter that her worth depended on a man's attention. Vivian felt something crack inside her. Not her heart this time. The wall she had built around her resentment. The barrier that separated her from her mother. I'm leaving Marcus, Vivian said. The first time she had spoken the words aloud, they felt true, real. Dorothy nodded. Good, she said. What do you need? Vivian did not know how to answer. She had been so alone for so long. The offer of help felt foreign, almost suspicious. I need to find a lawyer, she said finally. A good one. Someone who can fight him. Dorothy smiled, a fierce expression that Vivian had never seen before. I know just the person, she said. Margaret Sinclair. She handled my divorce from your father. Took him for everything he was worth. Vivian blinked. Her parents had divorced? When? How had she not known? 3 years ago, Dorothy said, reading her expression. Right after our fight. I finally did what I should have done decades earlier. And I've been too ashamed to tell you. Too afraid you'd think I was a hypocrite. You're not a hypocrite. Vivian said slowly. You're just human. We all wake up at different times. The words surprised her. Forgiving her mother had never been part of the plan, but something had shifted in those dark hours of labor. Some old wound had finally closed. I refused to let my daughter watch me shrink. If Vivian wanted Grace to grow up strong and independent, she had to model that strength. That meant forgiving. That meant rebuilding. That meant accepting help when it was offered. Okay, Vivian said, call Margaret Sinclair. Tell her I'm ready. That night, Nathaniel texted, checking in. How are you and Grace? A simple message. No pressure, no expectations, just presence. Vivian found herself responding, telling him about her mother's visit, about the lawyer, about the mountain of evidence she had compiled. His responses were measured, supportive. He did not try to fix anything or offer unsolicited advice. Just listened, acknowledged, validated. You're doing the right thing, he wrote. It won't be easy, but you're strong enough. Strong enough. When had anyone last told her she was strong? Marcus had spent years convincing her of the opposite, making her doubt herself, depend on him, believe that she was nothing without his guidance. But she was strong. She had survived childbirth alone, faced the truth about her marriage, started building an escape route, all while recovering from major surgery and caring for a newborn. That took strength, real strength, the kind that Marcus had tried to crush out of her. He had failed. The next morning, Vivian took Grace for a walk, just around the block. The first time outside since coming home from the hospital. The air felt different, cleaner. The sky seemed bluer. The sounds of the city were sharper, more alive. She did not need Marcus's permission to walk her own streets, did not need his approval to breathe fresh air. That small freedom felt revolutionary, a tiny act of rebellion that marked the beginning of everything. Margaret Sinclair's office occupied the entire 47th floor of the glass tower downtown. The elevator doors opened to reveal a reception area that whispered of old money and ruthless efficiency. Marble floors, original artwork on the walls, fresh flowers in crystal vases that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The receptionist was a woman in her 40s with steel gray hair and eyes that assessed Vivian in a single glance. She smiled professionally and gestured toward the leather seating area. Mrs. Ashford, Ms. Sinclair will be with you shortly. May I offer you water, coffee, tea? Water, please, Vivian said. Her throat was dry. Her palms were sweating. The folder in her lap felt heavier than its 200 pages should weigh. She had spent 3 weeks compiling this evidence. 3 weeks of late nights after Grace fell asleep. 3 weeks of scrolling through credit card statements and text messages and social media posts. 3 weeks of watching her marriage disintegrate into documented proof of betrayal. The receptionist returned with a glass of water, sparkling, with a slice of lemon. Even the water here was expensive. Vivian sipped and waited. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second bringing her closer to the moment that would change everything. Dorothy sat beside her. Her mother had insisted on coming, for moral support, for witness, for the simple act of being present in a way she had never been before. You're doing the right thing, Dorothy had said quietly. I wish I had done it sooner. Vivian looked at her mother, really looked at her for the first time in years. Dorothy was 58 but looked older. The years of her own unhappy marriage had carved lines into her face, dimmed the light in her eyes. But something had changed in the months since Vivian's divorce proceedings began. Dorothy seemed lighter, more present, more herself. How did you find the courage? Vivian asked. After 23 years, how did you finally leave? Dorothy was quiet for a moment, remembering. I watched you marry Marcus, she said finally. Watched you walk down the aisle toward a man who looked at you like a possession rather than a person. And I realized I had taught you that. By staying, by tolerating, by pretending that survival was the same as living. She reached over and took Vivian's hand. I left your father the week after your wedding, she continued, packed a bag while he was at work, called Margaret Sinclair from a hotel room, never went back. Vivian's breath caught. You never told me. I was ashamed, Dorothy admitted, ashamed that it took me so long, ashamed that I had set such a terrible example. I thought you would hate me for being a hypocrite. I don't hate you, Vivian said. The words surprised her. She had carried resentment toward her mother for years. But somewhere in the darkness of that hospital room, holding her newborn daughter, she had let it go. We can't change the past, Vivian continued. We can only do better going forward. Dorothy squeezed her hand. You're already doing better, she said. Grace is lucky to have you. The office door opened. Margaret Sinclair emerged like a predator stepping into the sunlight. She was 62 years old with silver hair cropped close to her skull. Her suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored. Her heels were low but expensive. Everything about her conveyed controlled power. Mrs. Ashford, Margaret said. Her handshake was firm, confident. Your mother speaks very highly of you. Let's see what we're working with. She led them into her private office. The view from the 47th floor was breathtaking. The city spread out below like a map of possibilities. In the distance, Vivian could see the Ashford Industries Tower, Marcus's kingdom, the empire he had built while his wife waited at home. Margaret sat behind her desk, gestured for Vivian and Dorothy to take the chairs across from her. Walk me through everything, Margaret said, from the beginning. Vivian opened her folder, began to speak. She told Margaret about the early years, the whirlwind courtship, the fairy tale wedding, the slow erosion of everything she thought she knew. She told her about the late nights, the canceled plans, the business trips that stretched longer and longer, the way Marcus looked at his phone more than he looked at her. She told her about Renee Blackwell, the executive assistant who was always there, always smiling, always perfectly professional, while stealing Vivian's husband inch by inch. She told her about the night at the gala, the water breaking, the ignored phone calls, the stranger who held her hand while her husband ate breakfast with his mistress. Margaret listened without interruption. Her expression remained neutral, but her pen moved constantly across her legal pad. Notes, questions, strategies forming in real time. When Vivian finished, Margaret set down her pen. This is comprehensive, she said. Your husband was remarkably careless. He never thought I would look, Vivian replied. He assumed I would stay blind forever. His arrogance will be his undoing, Margaret agreed. She flipped open the folder. Scanned through the pages with practiced efficiency. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, restaurant charges for dinners she had never attended, jewelry purchases for gifts she had never received, text messages, screenshots of conversations that made Vivian's stomach turn, intimate exchanges, planning exchanges, evidence of a parallel life that had been running alongside her marriage for years, social media posts, photographs of Marcus and Renee at events, vacations, dinners, the documentation of an affair hidden in plain sight, medical records. The most damning evidence of all, Renee Blackwell listed as Marcus Ashford's partner on her health insurance forms. Emergency contact information that should have been Vivian's name. Margaret closed the folder. This is more than enough to establish infidelity, she said. Now, let's discuss the prenup. Vivian's stomach dropped. The prenup, the document that had haunted her since the moment she signed it. I signed it without a lawyer, she admitted. I was young, naive, desperately in love. Marcus said it was just a formality. They always say that, Margaret replied. But here's the interesting thing about your prenup. She pulled a copy of the document from her files, flipped to a specific page, highlighted a section. Section 12, paragraph 4, Margaret read aloud. In the event that either party is found to have engaged in extramarital relations during the course of the marriage, all provisions of this agreement shall be rendered null and void, and standard community property laws shall apply. Vivian stared at the highlighted text. The infidelity clause, Margaret continued. Marcus put this in himself, probably to protect his assets if you ever strayed. He never imagined it would apply to him. So the prenup, Vivian started, is worthless, Margaret finished. The moment we can prove his affair, which should take approximately 30 seconds given your documentation, you're entitled to the standard divorce proceedings, half of everything he accumulated during the marriage. Alimony, child support, the works. Vivian's hands trembled, not from fear this time, from hope. Can we prove it? She asked. Margaret laughed, a sharp sound that held no humor. We can prove it 6 different ways before lunch, she said. The only question is strategy. Do we settle quietly and move on? Or do we burn his world down and salt the earth? Vivian thought about Grace, about the father her daughter would grow up knowing, about the example she wanted to set. I don't want to destroy him, she said slowly, not for revenge, but I want what's fair, what I'm owed, and I want him to know that I see him clearly now, that I'm not afraid anymore. Margaret nodded approvingly. A surgical strike rather than nuclear annihilation, she said. I can work with that. We'll present him with the evidence, give him a chance to settle reasonably. If he refuses, she smiled, that sharp grin that had terrified opposing counsel for 3 decades. If he refuses, we bury him so deep his grandchildren will still be digging out. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Margaret's team assembled a formal demand letter. 8 pages of legal language that essentially said, we know everything and you're going to pay. They calculated asset division, property, investments, business holdings. The penthouse alone was worth $4 million. Marcus's stake in Ashford Industries was worth considerably more. They documented child support requirements, medical expenses, education costs, everything Grace would need from birth through college graduation. They prepared for every possible response. Denial, anger, bargaining, threats. Marcus was a businessman. He would fight this like any hostile takeover. But Margaret had been fighting hostile husbands for 30 years. She knew every move before he made it. Vivian spent those 2 days in a state of nervous anticipation. She rehearsed what she would say, how she would stand, the expression she would wear when she finally confronted the man who had betrayed her. Nathaniel texted throughout, "How are you holding up?" "Nervous," Vivian replied, "but ready. You've got this. Whatever happens, you're not alone." Those words meant more than he probably knew. For years, she had been alone, even when Marcus was beside her. Alone in a marriage that existed only on the surface. Alone in a life that belonged to someone else's expectations. She was not alone anymore. The night before the confrontation, Vivian stood in Grace's nursery. The baby was sleeping peacefully, 6 months old and completely unaware of the drama unfolding around her. "I'm doing this for you," Vivian whispered, "so you never have to watch your mother shrink, so you know what it looks like when a woman stands up for herself." Grace stirred, made a soft sound, settled back into dreams. Vivian leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Sleep well, little one. Tomorrow, everything changes." Marcus's office occupied the corner of the 32nd floor of the Ashford Industries Tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, a view of the city that screamed wealth and power. Vivian had been here hundreds of times, dropping off lunch, attending company events, playing the role of supportive wife. She had never come here to end her marriage. The elevator doors opened. Vivian stepped out. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. The folder of evidence was tucked under her arm. Margaret Sinclair walked beside her. Dorothy waited in the lobby, ready to take Grace if needed. Marcus's assistant tried to intercept them. "Mrs. Ashford, do you have an appointment?" "Mr. Ashford is very busy this—" "He'll see me," Vivian said. She did not slow down. The assistant scrambled to keep up. "Please, Mrs. Ashford, let me just check if he's available." Vivian reached the office door, pushed it open without knocking. Marcus sat behind his massive desk, phone pressed to his ear, laptop open in front of him. The portrait of a busy executive, a man too important to be interrupted. He looked up. Surprise flickered across his features, then irritation. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, set it down carefully, leaned back in his chair. "Vivian, this is unexpected." His eyes moved to Margaret. Recognition dawned. Calculation followed. "Ms. Sinclair, I wasn't aware we had a meeting scheduled." "We don't," Margaret said pleasantly. "Consider this an informal discussion, one that could save you considerable embarrassment and expense." Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Perhaps this should wait until I have my own counsel present," he said. "By all means, call them," Margaret replied. "We can wait, but I suspect you'll want to see what we've brought before involving anyone else." Vivian set the folder on his desk. 200 pages of documented betrayal, credit card statements, text messages, photographs, medical records. Open it, she said. Her voice was steady, calm. She had practiced this moment 100 times. Marcus looked at the folder like it might bite him. Then slowly he flipped it open. Vivian watched his face as he reviewed the evidence. Watched the mask slip away piece by piece. Confusion gave way to recognition. Recognition gave way to fear. Fear hardened into cold calculation. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters. Someone has been spying on me, accessing my private accounts. This is a violation of privacy. It's probably illegal." Margaret made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Your wife's name is on those credit card accounts," she said. "She has every right to review the statements. The text messages were sent from your personal phone, which she had access to. The photographs are public social media posts. Nothing here was obtained illegally. The medical records were provided by a concerned third party who believed Mrs. Ashford deserved to know the truth." Margaret interrupted. "Whether they're admissible in court is a conversation for later. Right now, the question is simple. Do you want this information to become public? Or would you prefer to handle this quietly?" Marcus stood, came around the desk. He was using his height to intimidate, a tactic that had worked on Vivian for years. It did not work anymore. "This is ridiculous," Marcus said. "Whatever you think you've found, you're wrong. Renee is my assistant. We work closely together. That's all." "Your assistant is listed as your partner on her medical forms," Vivian said. "You've been paying for her health insurance out of your personal accounts. You took her to Mexico on a trip you told me was a leadership retreat. You bought her a diamond necklace 2 weeks before our anniversary. You've been sleeping with her since before our wedding." Each fact landed like a blow. Marcus flinched with each one. "You're being paranoid," he tried. "This is clearly postpartum depression. The hormones are making you see things that aren't there. We should get you some help." There it was, the gaslighting, the dismissal, the attempt to make her doubt her own sanity. Vivian had heard these words before, had believed them before, had apologized for her own perceptions because Marcus told her they were wrong. Never again. "I'm not paranoid," she said. Her voice did not waver. "I'm not hormonal. I'm not crazy. I'm finally seeing clearly for the first time in years." She stepped closer, meeting his eyes without flinching. "You left me to give birth alone. Our daughter came into this world while you were 30 feet away scrolling through your phone. You ate breakfast with your mistress while I was in emergency surgery. You missed the first 8 hours of Grace's life because Renee Blackwell was more important." Marcus opened his mouth to respond. Vivian cut him off. "I'm not finished," she said. "For 4 years, I made excuses for you, blamed myself for not being enough, apologized for having needs, shrunk myself smaller and smaller to fit into the space you allowed me." She shook her head slowly. "That woman is dead. The woman standing in front of you now sees exactly who you are, and she is done." Marcus's mask shattered completely. For a moment, raw panic showed in his eyes. "The prenup," he said desperately. "You signed a prenup. You'll walk away with nothing." "Section 12, paragraph 4, Margaret interjected smoothly. "The infidelity clause. In the event that either party is found to have engaged in extramarital relations, all provisions of this agreement shall be rendered null and void." She smiled pleasantly. "You wrote that clause yourself, Mr. Ashford, to protect your assets if your wife ever strayed, but it applies equally to you. The moment we prove your affair in court, and we will prove it, the prenup becomes worthless paper." Marcus's face went white. "This can't be happening," he muttered. "This isn't happening." "I've retained Ms. Sinclair to represent me in divorce proceedings," Vivian continued. "I believe your legal team has worked with her before. They can tell you what she's capable of." The door opened behind them. Renee Blackwell walked in, her heels clicking against the floor, a tablet in her hands, some urgent business matter she needed to discuss. She froze when she saw Vivian. Her eyes went wide. Color drained from her face. "Perfect timing," Vivian said. Her voice was pleasant, almost friendly. "You should probably hear this too." Renee looked at Marcus for guidance. He offered none. He was too busy watching his entire life crumble. "I'm filing for divorce," Vivian told her. "The prenup is void. I'll be entitled to half of everything Marcus accumulated during our marriage, plus alimony, plus child support. She turned to face Renee directly. Whatever future he promised you, whatever life he painted, it was as much a lie as my marriage. The prenup he promised would protect his assets from me. It will protect them from you too. Renee's lips parted. No sound came out. You're not the first, Vivian continued, and you probably won't be the last. Men like Marcus don't change. They just find new victims. That's enough, Marcus snapped. Renee, leave. Now. Renee fled. Her heels clattered against the marble. The door slammed behind her. Marcus rounded on Vivian. You're making a terrible mistake, he said. His voice was cold now, threatening. I will fight this with everything I have. I'll drag your name through the mud. I'll make sure everyone knows what a cold, ungrateful, paranoid— Mr. Ashford, Margaret interrupted, I strongly advise you to stop speaking. She pulled a document from her briefcase. This is our settlement offer. It's generous given the circumstances. Half of all marital assets. The penthouse, full custody of Grace, alimony for 10 years, child support until Grace turns 18. She set the document on his desk. You have 72 hours to accept. After that, we file in court. Every piece of evidence in that folder becomes public record. Every newspaper in the city runs the story of the CEO who abandoned his wife during childbirth. Every business publication dissects your character, your reputation, your judgment. Marcus stared at the document like it was a death sentence. The Beijing deal, he said weakly. The investors. They can't know about this. Then I suggest you accept our terms, Margaret replied. You'll still be wealthy, still run your company. You just won't have a wife to lie to anymore. She stood, gathered her briefcase. 72 hours, Mr. Ashford. Use them wisely. She walked out. Vivian followed. At the door she paused, looked back at the man she had married, the man she had loved, the man who had betrayed her in every way possible. Goodbye, Marcus, she said quietly. He did not respond, just stood behind his desk, surrounded by all his wealth and power, more alone than she had ever seen him. Vivian walked out of the office, down the hallway, into the elevator. The doors closed. Only then did she let herself breathe. It was over, or rather it was just beginning. But the hardest part was done. She had faced him, spoken her truth, reclaimed her power. Whatever came next, she could handle it. Nathaniel's driver was waiting outside the building. Dorothy sat in the back seat with Grace in her arms. Vivian climbed into the car, let the door close behind her, let the leather seat embrace her. How did it go? Dorothy asked. Vivian took Grace from her mother's arms, held her daughter close, breathed in that sweet baby scent. It's done, she said. He knows he can't pretend anymore. The car pulled away from the curb. Vivian watched the Ashford Industries tower shrink in the rearview mirror. She had walked into that building as Marcus Ashford's wife. She walked out as someone new, someone stronger, someone free. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nathaniel. How are you? Exhausted, relieved, terrified, proud. All at once? All at once. There was a pause, then another message. You're remarkable. Whatever happens next, remember that. Vivian smiled, the first real smile in weeks. She was remarkable. She had faced her worst fear and survived, had looked her betrayer in the eye and spoken the truth. She was not the woman Marcus had married anymore. She was not the woman who had shrunk herself to fit his expectations. She was someone new, someone she was only beginning to know, and she could not wait to meet her. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Vivian's new office. Golden light painted the walls. Dust motes danced in the beams. The city spread out below like a promise waiting to be kept. 6 months had passed since the confrontation in Marcus's office. 6 months since she had watched her old life shatter like glass on marble. The divorce was final now. Papers signed, assets divided. A marriage that had lasted 4 years dissolved in 90 days of legal proceedings. Marcus had fought, of course. That was his nature. He had hired his own team of lawyers, contested every claim, challenged every piece of evidence. But Margaret Sinclair was relentless. She had dismantled his arguments one by one, presented the evidence with surgical precision, called witnesses who confirmed what the documents proved. Even Mallory Ashford had testified. Marcus's own mother sitting in that courtroom, admitting that she had known about the affair, that she had helped cover it up, that she had chosen her son's image over his wife's well-being. The judge had not been sympathetic to Marcus. Vivian received the penthouse, $4 million in liquid assets, a percentage of Marcus's business holdings that would provide income for years, full custody of Grace, child support that ensured their daughter would want for nothing. It was more than fair. It was justice. She had sold the penthouse within weeks of the divorce being finalized, could not stand to live in that gilded prison anymore. Every room held memories she wanted to forget. Every surface reminded her of the life she had lost, the life she had escaped. Her new apartment was smaller, a 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, good schools nearby, a park across the street where she took Grace every afternoon. It felt like home in a way the penthouse never had. But the apartment was not where she spent most of her days now. Her days were spent here, in this office, building something new. The New Beginning Foundation occupied the entire 7th floor of a modest building downtown. Not as impressive as the Ashford Industries Tower, not as intimidating as Margaret Sinclair's law firm, but it was hers, built from the ashes of her old life, dedicated to helping others escape what she had escaped. The foundation offered legal support for women seeking divorce, financial counseling to help them become independent, housing assistance for those fleeing dangerous situations, job training and placement for those rebuilding their careers. Everything Vivian had needed during the worst months of her life, everything she had struggled to find, now available to anyone who walked through those doors. In the 6 months since its opening, the foundation had helped 112 women, 112 lives changed, 112 fresh starts made possible. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Ms. Ashford? Vivian turned from the window. Her assistant, Rachel, stood in the doorway. A young woman in her 20s with bright eyes and a determined jaw. Rachel had been one of the foundation's first clients, escaping a controlling boyfriend who had isolated her from her family. Now she worked at the front desk, greeting the women who came in seeking help. "Your 10 o'clock's here," Rachel said. "And there's a delivery for you. Flowers." Vivian smiled. "Send in my 10 o'clock and put the flowers in the conference room. They'll brighten the space." Rachel nodded and disappeared. Vivian settled behind her desk, prepared for another day of meetings, another day of helping women find their way to freedom, another day of being exactly who she wanted to be. At noon, Dorothy arrived with Grace. Vivian's mother had become a regular presence at the foundation. She volunteered 3 days a week, answered phones, talked to the women who came in, shared her own story of staying too long, and finally finding the courage to leave. She was good at it, better than Vivian had expected. There was something in Dorothy's voice when she spoke to these women, an understanding that could only come from shared experience. "Someone was hungry," Dorothy announced, carrying Grace into Vivian's office. "We had to stop for a snack on the way here." Grace reached for her mother with chubby arms. Vivian took her daughter and settled her on her lap. At 10 months old, Grace was developing a personality that seemed entirely her own, curious about everything, fearless in exploration, quick to laugh and slow to cry. She had Marcus's dark hair, but her eyes were Vivian's, brown with flecks of gold, eyes that seemed to understand more than they should. "How was the morning?" Vivian asked her mother. "Busy," Dorothy replied. 3 new intakes, one woman with 2 kids under 5, another leaving a 20-year marriage, the third barely 19 and already pregnant by a man who hits her. Vivian's heart clenched. Did we get them set up? Housing for the first 2. The young one is going to need more support. She doesn't have anywhere to go, no family willing to take her in. "We'll find something," Vivian said. "We always do." Dorothy settled into the chair across from the desk, watched her granddaughter play with a stuffed elephant. "You're doing good work here," she said quietly. "Important work." "We're doing it together," Vivian corrected. "I couldn't do any of this without you." Dorothy's eyes glistened. "I wasted so many years," she said, "staying in a marriage that was killing me, teaching you that tolerance was the same as love. If I could go back—" "We can't go back," Vivian interrupted gently. "We can only go forward. And you're going forward now. That's what matters. Grace made a sound that might have been agreement. Both women laughed. "She's going to be a force of nature," Dorothy observed. "Just like her mother." Vivian looked at her daughter, at this tiny person who had come into her life at the worst possible moment and made everything better. "She's going to know her worth from the beginning," Vivian said. "She's going to grow up watching women help each other, lift each other up, fight for each other." She kissed Grace's forehead. "She's going to be exactly who she wants to be." Carolyn threw the party. Grace's first birthday, a celebration not just of the baby's arrival in the world, but of everything that had changed since that night at the gala. The guest list was small: Dorothy, Caroline, a few women from the foundation who had become friends, Rachel and her mother, Margaret Sinclair, who had become something between a mentor and an aunt, and Nathaniel. He arrived carrying a gift wrapped in silver paper. Not ostentatious, not expensive looking, just a simple package tied with a blue ribbon. "I hope it's appropriate," he said, handing it to Vivian. "I'm not very good at baby gifts." Vivian smiled and set it on the table with the others. "I'm sure it's perfect." The party unfolded in the warmth of a summer afternoon. Cake and ice cream, balloons in pink and white, Grace in a dress covered with butterflies, smearing frosting across her face with pure joy. Vivian watched from the corner of the room, taking it all in, memorizing the moment. A year ago, she had been in a hospital room, alone except for a stranger, giving birth while her husband ignored her calls. Now she stood in a room full of people who loved her, who had supported her through the worst months of her life, who would continue to support her through whatever came next. The contrast was almost too much to process. Nathaniel appeared beside her, handed her a glass of something sparkling. "You look thoughtful," he observed. "Just remembering," as she said, "this time last year." "I know," he replied. "I was thinking about it too." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Grace open presents with enthusiastic destruction, watching Dorothy laugh at something Caroline said, watching a room full of women who had found their way through darkness into light. "I'm grateful," Vivian said finally, "for all of this, for the foundation, for my mother coming back, for Grace being healthy and happy." She looked at Nathaniel. "For you," she added it quietly. "For that night at the gala, for staying when you had every reason to leave." Nathaniel met her eyes. "I had no reason to leave," he said. "You asked me to stay. That was reason enough." The simplicity of it struck her. He had stayed because she asked, because it was the right thing to do, because he understood what it meant to be alone when you needed someone most. "Oliver's been asking about Grace," Nathaniel said, changing the subject. "He wants to know when he can teach her to play chess." Vivian laughed. "She can barely walk. Chess might be a few years away." "I told him that. He said he'd start with the basics. Apparently there are baby chess boards." "There are not baby chess boards." "There absolutely are. He showed me on the internet." Vivian shook her head, still laughing. "Your son is something else." "He gets it from his mother," Nathaniel said softly. Something passed behind his eyes, the ghost of a grief that never fully faded. Vivian reached out and touched his arm. A brief contact, comfort offered without words. "Tell Oliver he can start Grace on baby chess whenever he wants," she said. "I have a feeling she's going to need the challenge." Nathaniel smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "I'll tell him. He'll be thrilled." The party continued. Presents were opened. Cake was demolished. Stories were shared, and laughter echoed off the walls. As the afternoon faded into evening, the guests began to leave. Hugs and promises to call, plans for lunch dates and coffee meetings. The web of connection that Vivian had built around herself since the divorce. Finally, only Nathaniel remained. Grace was asleep in her arms, exhausted from the excitement of her very first birthday party, her small face peaceful, dreaming whatever dreams one-year-olds dream. "I should let you rest," Nathaniel said. "You've had a long day." Vivian nodded, but neither of them moved toward the door. "The gift," she said suddenly. "I never opened it." She found the silver package on the table, set Grace gently in her playpen, pulled the blue ribbon and let the paper fall away. Inside was a book, worn and old. The cover showed a little bear in a forest. "Oliver's favorite," Nathaniel explained. "When he was small, his mother used to read it to him every night. After she died, I took over. Read it every night for 5 years straight." Vivian turned the book over in her hands. The spine was cracked from use, the pages soft from countless readings. "This is his," she said. "You can't give this away." "He wanted to," Nathaniel replied. "He said Grace should have it, that her mother would read it to her the way his mother read it to him." Vivian's eyes filled with tears. "Nathaniel." "Don't," he said gently. "Don't turn this into something bigger than it is. It's just a book, a story about a bear who learns to be brave." But it was not just a book. They both knew that. It was a piece of history, a connection between past and future, a gift that meant more than any expensive toy or designer outfit. Vivian set the book carefully on the shelf beside Grace's other stories. "Thank you," she said. "I don't have words for how much this means." Nathaniel moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the handle. "I know you're not ready," he said quietly. "I'm not asking for anything, but I want you to know, when you are ready, if you ever are, I'll be here." Vivian's heart clenched. "Nathaniel, you don't have to say anything," he continued. "You're building a life, finding out who you are. That's exactly what you should be doing. I just wanted you to know that you're not alone in it, whatever happens next." He opened the door, stepped through, looked back one more time. "Good night, Vivian." "Good night, Nathaniel." The door closed. His footsteps faded down the hallway. Vivian stood in the quiet apartment, surrounded by the debris of the party, balloons deflating in the corners, wrapping paper scattered across the floor. Grace stirred in her playpen, made a soft sound. Vivian lifted her daughter and carried her to the nursery, changed her into pajamas, settled her in the crib. "Someone gave you a very special present today," she whispered. "A book about a bear who learns to be brave." Grace's eyes were already closing, fighting sleep and losing. "I'm going to read it to you every night," Vivian continued, "the way his mother read it to him, the way I'll read it to your children someday." The baby's breathing evened out, deep and peaceful. Vivian stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching her daughter sleep. 1 year ago, everything had shattered, her marriage, her illusions, her sense of self. Now she stood in an apartment that was hers, running a foundation that was hers, raising a daughter who was hers. She had built a new life from the wreckage of the old one. Not perfect, not complete, but hers. That was enough for now. 3 weeks after the party, Vivian made a decision. It came to her in the quiet hours of early morning. Grace asleep in the next room. The city spread out below her window like a sea of lights. She had spent a year learning who she was without Marcus, learning to stand on her own, learning that she was strong enough to survive anything. But survival was not the same as living, and she was ready to live again. She texted Nathaniel at 6 in the morning. A simple message. "Are you awake?" The response came immediately. "Always. Everything okay?" "More than okay. Can you come over?" "Give me 20 minutes." He arrived in 18, still in jeans and a casual shirt, hair slightly rumpled, looking more human than the polished billionaire the world saw. Vivian opened the door, let him in, led him to the living room where Dawn was painting the windows gold. "What's going on?" he asked, concern in his voice, ready to help with whatever crisis she faced. "No crisis," she said. "Just a conversation that's been waiting to happen." She gestured to the couch. They sat, not touching, but close. "I've been thinking about what you said," Vivian began, "after Grace's party, about being here when I'm ready." Nathaniel's expression shifted, hope flickering behind carefully controlled features. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. Vivian considered the question, really considered it. She thought about Marcus, about the 4 years she had spent shrinking herself to fit his expectations, about the lies she had believed, the betrayals she had ignored. She thought about the hospital room, the stranger who had held her hand, the man who had stayed when her husband could not be bothered. She thought about the past year, the divorce, the foundation, the slow rebuilding of a self she had lost. "I'm not the woman you met at that gala," she said finally. "I'm not the broken, abandoned wife who needed saving." "I know that," Nathaniel replied. "I never wanted that woman. I wanted to meet the person she would become." Vivian's breath caught. "And who do you see now?" she asked. Nathaniel studied her face, taking his time, choosing his words carefully. I see a woman who faced the worst thing that could happen and found her way through it, he said. I see a mother who puts her daughter first every single day. I see someone who took her pain and turned it into purpose, who helps other women because she remembers what it felt like to need help. He reached out, took her hand, his fingers warm against her skin. I see someone I want to know better, he continued. Someone I want to spend time with, not because she needs me, but because I need her. Vivian felt tears threatening, happy tears this time, the kind that came from hope rather than despair. I'm scared, she admitted. I chose so badly before. I don't trust my own judgment. You were young, Nathaniel said, and Marcus was very good at pretending to be what you needed. That wasn't a failure of judgment. That was a failure of his character. What if I make the same mistake again? You won't, Nathaniel said simply, because you're not the same person. And I'm not Marcus. Vivian looked at their joined hands, his fingers intertwined with hers, a connection that felt natural. Right. I want to take this slow, she said. Really slow. I need to trust that this is real before I can let myself fall. However slow you need, Nathaniel agreed. I've waited this long. I can wait longer. Vivian laughed softly. You've been waiting since the gala? I've been waiting since the moment you grabbed my sleeve and asked me to stay, he admitted. Something about you. I couldn't explain it then. Still can't explain it now. But I knew I wanted to know you. Even though I was married? Especially because you were married. Oh. You were clearly in a situation that was wrong for you, but you had this strength underneath the fear, this light that hadn't quite gone out. He squeezed her hand. I wanted to see that light shine properly, without anyone trying to dim it. Vivian leaned forward, rested her forehead against his. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for letting me stay, he replied. They sat like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, sharing the same space. Two people who had both known loss, both known loneliness, both found their way to something new. Grace woke with a cry, that unmistakable sound of a baby ready to start her day. Vivian pulled back reluctantly. Duty calls, she said. Nathaniel smiled. I'll make coffee. You get the baby. It was such a simple thing, such an ordinary exchange, the kind of conversation couples had every morning across the world. But for Vivian, it felt extraordinary. The beginning of something she had stopped believing she could have. A partnership, a real one, built on honesty and respect and mutual care. She walked toward the nursery, already smiling. 1 year later. Grace's second birthday party was bigger than the first. More guests, more decorations, more case. The foundation had grown too. 347 women helped in the past year. A second office opened in the neighboring city, plans in the works for a third. Vivian stood in the corner of her living room, watching the celebration unfold. Grace toddled between groups of adults, commanding attention wherever she went, speaking in sentences now, complete thoughts expressed with emphatic gestures and stubborn determination. Oliver followed behind her, 9 years old and completely devoted to the little girl who had become his honorary sister. He had taught her chess, as promised, baby chess with colored pieces and simplified rules. Grace lost every game and demanded to play again immediately. Dorothy was in the kitchen, directing operations, making sure everyone had enough to eat, playing grandmother with enthusiastic dedication. Caroline told stories from the labor and delivery ward, making the other guests laugh with tales of babies born in parking lots and fathers who fainted at the sight of blood. And Nathaniel stood beside Vivian, their shoulders touching, his hand resting comfortably at the small of her back. A year of slow, of learning each other's rhythms, of building trust piece by piece. Now they were here, together, not married, not even officially engaged, but committed in a way that felt more real than any ceremony could make it. Happy? Nathaniel asked quietly. Vivian looked around the room, at her daughter, her mother, her friends, her partner. More than I knew was possible, she replied. Grace ran up to them, arms raised, demanding to be lifted. Nathaniel scooped her up, settled her on his hip like he had done it 1,000 times. Cake, Grace announced. Want cake now? Cake comes after presents, Nathaniel told her. Those are the rules. My birthday, Grace insisted. My rules. Vivian laughed. She has a point. Don't encourage her, Nathaniel said. But he was smiling. They cut the cake early. Grace covered herself in frosting. Presented with a bib, she threw it on the floor with magnificent disdain. Oliver helped her open presents, showed her each toy, explained each book, promised to play with everything together. The party wound down as evening approached. Guests departed with hugs and promises to visit soon. Finally, it was just family. Dorothy, Caroline, Oliver, Grace, Nathaniel, and Vivian. They sat on the balcony as the sun set. Grace asleep in her mother's arms, Oliver reading a book with a flashlight, Dorothy and Caroline arguing good-naturedly about nothing important. Nathaniel reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box. Vivian's heart stopped. Before you panic, he said quickly, it's not what you think. He opened the box. Inside was a key. To my house, he explained. Not an engagement ring, not a proposal, just a key. So you can come and go whenever you want. So you always have a place that's yours. Vivian took the key, turned it over in her fingers. This is a big step, she said. Only if you want it to be, Nathaniel replied. No pressure, no expectations. Just a door that's always open. Vivian looked at the key, at the man who had given it to her, at the life she had built from the ashes of the one she lost. I love you, she said. The words came out easily, naturally, true. Nathaniel's breath caught. I love you too, he replied. Have for a while now. I know, Vivian said, smiling. I was waiting for the right moment to say it. And this is it? On a balcony, surrounded by party debris, with cake frosting in your hair? Vivian laughed. This is exactly it, because this is real life, messy and imperfect and beautiful. She put the key in her pocket, leaned against his shoulder, felt his arm wrap around her. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For waiting, for being patient, for never pushing. Thank you for letting me be part of this, he replied. Part of your story, part of Grace's story. Grace stirred in her sleep, made a soft sound, settled again. The sun sank below the horizon. Stars began to appear. The city lights flickered on one by one. 2 years ago, Vivian's water had broken at a gala. Her husband had ignored her calls. A stranger had held her hand. Now that stranger was her partner. Her daughter was thriving. Her foundation was helping hundreds of women find their own fresh starts. Everything had changed. Everything had transformed. But some things remained constant. The strength she had discovered in herself. The love she had found in unexpected places. The determination to build a life that was authentically hers. The champagne glass had shattered that night, taking her old life with it. But some things need to break before they can become something stronger. She was living proof of that now. And as the stars emerged above, and her daughter slept peacefully in her arms, and the man she loved sat beside her on that balcony, Vivian Ashford knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was just the beginning. Vivian's story reminds us of something important. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most wish let us down the hardest. And sometimes a stranger's kindness means more than a lifetime of empty promises. If this story touched your heart, if you found yourself rooting for Vivian and Grace, I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment telling me what moment hit you the hardest. Was it the hospital scene? The confrontation? The ending? And if you want more stories like this one, stories about strong women who find their way through the darkness, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening until the very end. Your support means everything. Until next time.